Coming up on the program, we're going to talk about ways you can grow indoors during the winter months on a budget and if you want to spend a little extra money, as well as benefits of leaves in your garden.
We also have author, blogger, and fermentation expert Amy Jeanroy on the program, and we're going to talk about ways that you can use your extra fruit. All that and more coming up today on the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener Podcast.
The Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener Podcast is permeating into your ears with your host, Joey Bear.
And it could be the weeds. Some gardeners try to get all the weeds out of their garden. Other gardeners leave them in their garden. It's really a decision that you need to make. There's benefits to both sides of that. It's just something that you need to figure out what you want to do for your garden.
And Holly Bear.
Canning is a science. When you're canning, you want to make sure you follow the directions, follow the recipe, don't cut corners, don't replace things. It's crucial to you, your health, and your family.
They're professional gardeners with full-time jobs, and they're on the air now.
Welcome to the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener Podcast, a podcast for the health-conscious organic gardener worldwide. I am your host, Joy Baird. Beside me is my wife, co-host, best friend, and gardening partner,
Holly Bear.
Behind the TWVG microphone here at the WI Garden Media Studios in southeast Wisconsin, the information that you're going to hear is important and vital to your garden. You just may have to tweak some of the dates and times you applied for in your particular growing area. If you're tuning in for the very first time, we appreciate that and welcome you to the program. If you've joined us for all of our broadcasts, we thank you for that. If you missed any of the broadcasts, you can always find all of the podcasts on our website at the WisconsinVegetableGardener.com. There's a tab at the top of the page that says podcast. You can find all previous 15 episodes that we've done and the guests and the content for each one of those. They are downloadable, available on iTunes, Stitcher, and Podomatic. You can listen to them directly from the website as well. If you're tuning in for the very first time and you're not really familiar of who we are or what we do, we'll tell you a little bit about what we do, and then we'll get into growing indoors in the winter.
So what we do is we create a bunch of weekly videos about growing food, what to do with the food you grow, how to use your space best, and simple home living, things like that. Then we also have a digital magazine that comes out quarterly. It's a full-color digital magazine, and it has lots of great information in it. And that's free on our website as well, which is at the WisconsinVegetableGardener.com. And we also have this podcast.
And a number of other things we do behind the scenes. So, since this is the last episode of the year, podcast episode 16, we thought it would be an appropriate time to discuss ways to grow indoors during the winter months. Here in the Northern Hemisphere, we spend about as much time indoors during the winter as we do outdoors during the summer. And there is some ways that we can grow indoors and get some productivity out of it, not to the magnitude as we would outdoors, but we can do it on a budget, very cheaply, and we can also spend a few dollars and be a little more advanced in that.
Right. So, one thing you can do simply is growing herbs in your windowsill. And that includes anything that you want to grow. We have quite a bit of basil. We've got some rosemary, sage. What else do we have, Joey?
We got flowers.
Oh, yeah, flowers. We got a
dwarf
lime tree. So we have that growing, and it's pretty simple. We just have some hanging baskets that we actually found on the side of the road. People kind of just toss those. Your neighbor might just be tossing them now because they figure, oh, I'm done with this. I'll just get a new one in the spring. But yeah, so we see those, and then we put the hanging baskets there. We, hung up some hooks and stuff. And we're fortunate because we do have a south-facing window, so it gets a really good amount of sunlight. But if you have an east or west window, that would work as well. And then you have a nice little herb garden, some freshness all year round, and then the lime tree is nice too.
Now the lime tree is not in a hanging basket.
It's in a big pot.
Right.
But yeah.
Now with the herbs, we can get away. We've done lettuce in that window before. Now you're not going to you're not going to be like growing green beans or tomatoes or anything like that because of the inconsistency of direct sunlight that is required for those particular vegetables. But that's we got hang pots filled with compost or potting soil from SueCompost.com, one of the sponsors on our video series, and it works quite well. Now the only downside to it is, initially when we put the soil in, and this happens to many of us during the early spring days, when it becomes warm outside, we get fungus gnats.
Right.
It only lasts a couple of days, maybe a week or two. You can control them with soapy water to get rid of them. Now you can also mulch the top of the containers with a variety of different material because they just bed right underneath there and they lay their eggs. You can of the container. You can also bake the soil in the oven to kill all of that and then revitalize the soil with Pear Tea. But that's more of a lengthy process. We'll tolerate the gnats instead of baking our soil in that realm. Now that's a very inexpensive way to grow herbs indoors. Okay, now you can take it up a notch or a couple notches and put a little money towards this and grow under grow lights.
Right. So you can grow under grow lights. We've grown successfully green beans,
potatoes, carrots,
lettuce.
Now we're not growing in soil. We're not growing in compost or potting soil. We're growing in a cocoa fiber medium. Cocoa fiber, cocoa coir, it's the byproduct of the coconut industry, and it doesn't retain any nutrients. It's just basically, it's a sponge that what you put into it will hold that material or that liquid and then allow the plants to take up what it needs to take up. So it's essentially like a sponge. You get it moist. It retains the moisture of the nutrients that you add to the cocoa coir, and then the plants will grow in it. Now, growing indoors in a cocoa coir, there are nutrients. That's what they call them. Now it's not always organic.
No.
It's not always organic, and that's one thing you want to be aware of.
Right. So that's something to keep in mind, is that it's not 100% organic, but it is better than, I think, some other options. And you can even use something called Pear Tea as a nutrient.
Now, we're not growing 50 pounds of tomatoes or 40 bushels of beans. We're simply growing in 9-inch pots, I think they're 5-gallon. I think they're 5-gallon plastic pots that we're growing in. It's not like a big field or anything. We grow underneath a T5 light, has 8 light bulbs, 2 different circuits on it, so you can have half of them on or half of them off or all of them on at any given time. Now, there is an investment to all of this, and that's something if you choose to do. Now, the benefit to having that big T5 light is in the spring, as we wrap up the indoor growing project, we can utilize that light for starting seeds underneath.
Yeah.
And we've got it on a chain that hangs from the ceiling to where we can raise and lower it as the indoor growing plants grow up. And in the spring, we can lower it down to where we can start seeds and that type of thing as well. Now, we'll get into the seed starting thing. Windows work just fine. We did it for many years without any growing lights, but that's another topic for another show. So, in addition to growing in the cocoa coir fiber, we grow in a hydroponic system. Now let's discuss the difference between hydroponic and aquaponic for those who may be a little confused about the difference. So there's aquaponics, which is you have a reservoir or a tank where fish live, you feed the fish, and that water is circulated through the plants for the plants to take up the nutrients that the fish have left, the manure, I guess, the droppings, whatever, the nutrients in the water, and then the plants pick that up, and then it circulates back into the tank where the fish are at. Now, this can be done indoors, not like in a house, I guess, but in maybe like a barn or a shed or a heated building, basement maybe, and then you eat the fish, and it's kind of a sustainable type of deal. Well, you got to add the fish. The fish ain't breeding, I don't believe. But that's one way of doing it. Now, you can do it on a very, very small scale. You can put like a floating raft. They make these things. I don't know the correct terminology. But on top of your fishbowl. And then you can grow, lettuces or herbs in that as, the roots go into the fishbowl and that type of thing. So that's aquaponics. Hydroponics is growing in water, circulating through the roots, but you add nutrients to that water without having fish involved in the equation. So we've got a small 5-gallon bucket. You fill it up 2.5 gallons, and it has a pump, and it circulates the water through clay balls, which the roots root themselves into. That's the top matter where the water penetrates through, percolates through, and it catches in the reservoir. Now, if you remember the interview we had with Brock Hughes up in Canada, he does a Dutch bucket system. It's kind of on the same premise, but that's what we're talking about, a square bucket that has a pump and a circulation system in it. You can get these from any indoor growing system company, Paradigm Gardens, which is the sponsor of the program early on. They have that available. It's I'm wanting to say between $50 and $70. But anyway, getting back to the point of this, we grew peppers in it the first year. It didn't really work that well because the peppers were a fidgety thing to try to grow in the hydro. People do it very successfully. We just failed at it miserably. So we decided to go with the second year with a very simple project, which was growing leaf lettuce. And that worked very, very well.
Mm-hmm. We got 2 cuttings off of it.
2.5 cuttings, something like that. Lettuce takes 60 days, and we just broadcasted the seeds in the clay balls, and the moisture that circulated from the reservoir hydrated the seeds, and they rooted, and it was a very nice bouquet of lettuce that we were able to harvest. And we'll probably do something very similar to that again this year, maybe lettuce and spinach together, maybe some greens. Now, maybe you don't have access to a south-facing window, or you are very limited on space to where you don't have access to the availability of a grow light or a system like we have, and you can see this in some of our indoor growing videos. You can do microgreens. Mm-hmm. Well, explain what microgreens are. What are microgreens?
They're just well, are you talking about
in the mason jar?
Oh, those are
sprouts.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
So basically, sprouts are pretty cheap to do. You just need a mason jar. I mean, you can buy a whole sprouting system, but that's not really necessary. And you can just use a mason jar, and then you need like a screen. Some people use like a screen or some pantyhose. You just don't want to make sure that the seeds can't get through the top. And you just basically soak your seeds with some water. You do this twice a day until they start to sprout. And then once they start to sprout, you can eat them. You can let the sprouts get longer, but they are very tasty. They're a teeny bit bitter, but just kind of green and fresh and something nice to have in the middle of winter. And
you may have had sprouts maybe on a sub sandwich from a commercial sub store, and you just didn't know about it.
Yeah, lots of people have had sprouts.
Right.
Bean sprouts.
We tried sprouts. What was it? Squash sprouts once.
Yeah.
That was not a good decision.
Super bitter.
Made great compost though on that. But anyway, now in the hydroponic, let's get back to the hydroponic system before we have to go to a break here. With the hydroponic system, you have a reservoir and you add nutrients to that reservoir. That nutrients pumps through the root system, and the plants take up the nutrients that it needs to grow. It's not an organic practice with some of the nutrients that are available commercially. We have found a organic nutrient substitute from those that you would buy at the store, and that being Moo Tea.
Moo Tea, yeah. And Moo Tea is from a closed circuit system, and it's out in California. And Annie Haven raises these cows. She raises them without giving them any antibiotics or hormones or anything like that, and they're grass fed, and they're very happy cows, and she takes their manure. I don't know exactly what she does. She dries it or whatever and puts it in the bag, and it makes a great fertilizer and nutrients.
And the bag can be used she's Authentic Haven brand Moo Tea is a sponsor of the program here, and we're not picking them out and glorifying them for any given reason. We're simply notifying you that that is a product that can make your hydroponic system an organic hydroponic system. And this is not just us telling you this. This has been done in a number of different industry ways, commercially, with her product. So it's not just the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener did this. There's a number of companies that have done this, and there is some companies that utilize this for the growth of medical marijuana hydroponically too. Yeah. So with the Moo Tea. But anyway, it can be, the bag can be used multiple times, but it's an organic practice, and she takes care of these cattle better, as good, or if not better, as you would take care of your children or your grandchildren.
Yeah.
And that's not a slam to you. I'm just telling you that these are very, very well kept and mannered cattle that produce this organic manure tea. So that's something that we have found that works very well in the indoor growing systems, as well as revitalizing the soil outdoors as a soil conditioner, with that being said. So you can grow indoors very easily, very cheaply, in a window. And you can go up and be an advanced level and grow in coco coir and hydroponic systems indoors. And it really allows you to continue growing on a much, much smaller scale all year round. Coming up next after the break, tell me what you really think. And we're going to talk about the vitalization and the importance of leaves on your property. All that right after this. If you could double the life of your raised bed boxes by sealing the wood with a non-toxic wood preservative, would you? Well, now you can, with a clear, penetrating product called Internal Wood Stabilizer. It's 100% non-toxic and easy to apply. Seal your bare, untreated wood surfaces, even chicken coops, by spraying Internal Wood Stabilizer. It's invisible, seals the wood from the inside out, and never wears off. Recommended by organic gardening experts. Internal Wood Stabilizer. Check it out at timberprocoatings.com.
Oh, yeah. What you say? You say Nasala Kombucha. It'll put some glide in your stride and some pep in your step. Nasala Kombucha. Yeah.
Nasala Kombucha makes your body happy. Nasala Kombucha makes your body smile.
Do you want your next raised beds to be easy, functional, and beautiful? The Embrace helps you create the garden you've always wanted. Finally, raised beds that everyone can assemble and enjoy. No tools needed. Just slide any lumber into the Embrace corner, fill with your favorite soil mix, and you're ready to plant. Made from 100% recycled steel right here in the USA. And a portion of every sale helps to build school and community gardens all across the country. Let the Embrace help you create your next raised bed. Grow beautifully with the Embrace. Available at local garden centers and online at artofthegarden.net.
I'm Mike Novak from the Mike Novak Internet Experience. And a day without Joey and Holly Baird is like a day without the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener podcast. Wait, that's the same thing. Oh well, here they are.
Welcome back to the program. If you want to find out more about the sponsors you've just heard and our entire sponsor lineup, check them out at the website, thewisconsinvegetablegardener.com. You can click on the podcast tab there, and you can see all of the links available. Those links are also available in the show notes below. Well, it's that time of the show for our segment. Tell me what you really think. And in this segment of Tell Me What You Really Think, Holly, you decided to choose this topic of
people that don't reuse stuff, kind of. They just throw things away. I don't really know exactly what to call a topic. Maybe being smarter with what they buy and what they use. Thinking outside the box before you toss something, in the garbage. I don't know. People who
wasteful people. Now, this segment, we're open and candid about what we feel about topics. We've done this on a number of programs. Now, we take a very professional level of when we come to you each week with this with our weekly video series, our digital quarterly magazine, as well as this podcast. We feel that if you've taken time out of your day to listen to us, to watch us, to learn about a specific topic, that we don't waste your time and we get right to the importance of that particular topic and give you as much information as we are able to provide for you so you can be successful at accomplishing the task at hand. But with Tell Me What You Really Think, it gives us an opportunity to tell you what we really think kind of off the record. So wasteful people who throw away things without caring, a disposable world of trash. That's kind of what you're getting at here.
Yeah, I don't think people always realize that when they throw something away, there is no waste going to a landfill, which takes up space and takes up space away from other things that it could be. So that there's no like, see you later, it disappears, poof, gone. It's going to a landfill where it's going to sit for thousands upon thousands of years. Nothing breaks down in a landfill. So they cover it up, they seal it up, and that's it. So that's why I think when people throw things away, I mean, yeah, it's to my advantage. Sometimes I find really good stuff on the side of the road that people have left there, but it's just more or less think about what you're doing. If you leave it on the side of the road hoping somebody will take it, that's good, but if nobody takes it, then perhaps you should give it to Goodwill or, your local thrift store or whatever, or try to sell it or give it to a family member or something that could use it, instead of just waiting for the trash man to pick it up.
Now, not everybody is going to drive down your street and find that you've left a trellis or an old baseball bat or fill in the blank bookshelf on your street corner for the junk man to pick up the next day to give it, for somebody to pick it up. But you've got to be conscious of what you're throwing away. Even if something is slightly damaged, some people will throw it out and buy new because it's got a scratch or a dent or a ding in it. We have found a lot of great items along the side of the road on junk day. Now, you may not feel comfortable in doing that, and that's perfectly understandable feeling. But there is some rewards that can be found, and you have to know where to look. We used to do this on a very regular basis. We knew the townships in the area and what day trash day was, and we'd either drive the night before or the morning of trash pickup. We knew the areas that would have the more good stuff, I guess, the more upper class, middle class areas that would have the very nice throwaway junk.
Yes,
yeah. The table saws, the drills,
a
bread maker, fish bowl,
shelves.
Very, very nice bookshelves, lamps, that type of thing. There's certain areas of a town where people throw out trash, and it's really trash because they value what they have. There's other parts of society that it doesn't matter what it is, they're tired of looking at it, whether it's a value of 2 cents or $200, they're going to put it on the curb because they just want it gone. We found a couple of really nice charcoal barbecue grills too.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with them at all. But what I'm getting at is here, we're in a throwaway society. We have been for a number of years, decades maybe, based on how old you are. That throw away, tired of it, buy new, and that's the way the world works. So we want to be very, very aware of what we're doing to the environment, taking care of what we have, and seeing if what we have that we don't want anymore, someone else could value it. You got anything else for this?
Nothing, that's it.
So let's close the door on this topic. Leaves are a very vital part of gardening for us, and they should be for you as well. Just don't bag up the leaves that are on your property and throw in the street for the municipality to pick up in your city, or take to the burn pile. And Holly, you're going to explain what some of the vital importance that leaves play in the gardening world.
Sure. So leaves provide a number of nutrients for your garden. And the reason why leaves are important is because, or why they have those nutrients, is because if you think about a tree, their roots go way deep down in the soil. And there's a lot of nutrients in that soil. And then it's going to put the nutrients into the leaves, into the growth of the plant. So once those leaves start to fall, obviously the plant's not giving any more nutrients, but those leaves are nutrient dense. And so that's important because that's good for your soil. It's going to break down over winter if you put it over in your garden. And as it rains or it snows, and then as it thaws, that water is going to drip through to your garden and run those nutrients through it.
Now, you can vacuum these leaves up with a leaf vacuum. If you don't have that available, you can certainly use a lawnmower. Bagging lawnmower is ideal because you can capture all the material in there, or you can just run across it and then rake it up and put it on your garden beds. Another way you can get these leaves to a smaller diameter, because these leaves are going to break down quicker the smaller the diameter that they are, is you can put them in a trash can and run a weed whacker through it, which may or may not be a fun or may or may not be a dangerous activity to participate in, but it's another way to break down the particles of leaves. Now, what we have done, and we intensify the use of leaves each year, later at this time and a little later in the fall, is we will vacuum them up off the property, and we'll also go in the street and vacuum them up as the other neighbors pile them in the streets, and we bring them back to the garden beds. We garden in a raised berm format, and that simply means that we have permanent grow spaces and distinct walk paths so they don't cross each other, and we can delineate between the areas, and you have beds that you can really focus work on. If you have a bed that's poor soil or poor growing, you can dedicate time for that particular area, and it's not overwhelming to say, oh, I've got to work on this portion of the garden. There's no differentiation between one bed to the other, and you're going to have a certain amount of walk area anyway, whether you have a traditional garden or a raised berm garden. This way you always have that walk space, and you always have that grow area, and you're not losing anything because you're going to walk in a certain area anyway in the garden when you're harvesting. So we will mulch leaves and build the piles up on these grow beds about a foot to, in some cases, 18, 24 inches tall if we have enough leaves available. Now, by the time spring comes, the piles will be
at least
half of the height that they once were, and we will just leave them alone. We will move the leaves away where we're going to plant, and then we'll plant and then move the leaves back around either the start, or we'll leave them. If we're going to plant lettuce or spinach, we'll pull the leaves away from that area and broadcast the seeds. But if it's this distinct plant, such as maybe a cabbage or a kale, then we'll bring the leaves back around the base of that start and use the leaves as a mulch to retain moisture and suppress weeds. And we've done this. We also use it to build the soil up, as we've talked about several times in the program, for our corn growing plot. We also had an area last year. We had a 50 square foot bed, raised berm, that we worked diligently to weed. We spaded it. We got as many roots out of it as possible. And then at the time of the leaves falling, we mulched it with about a foot of leaves. Came back this spring, the first day we got in the garden, we took tomato cages, because we had decided that's where the tomatoes were going to go, one area of tomatoes. We put tomato cages in there, and this was March. And we never touched it until the time we put the tomatoes actually in the ground 2 months later. Now, since that time, the leaves have broke down and went in the soil and dissipated and disappeared. But we've had very minimal amount of weeds come up on that bed. And we're going to do that same practice over and over and over again until we run out of leaves this fall, no matter how much time it takes, because we understand the value of leaves. Now, you can also bag these leaves up and put them in the corner of the garden and use them as mulch through the spring months too. Now, we'll also take on certain beds the excess leaves, if we have any. We'll make compost piles of strictly leaves, and then in the spring we'll pull those leaves off those beds, the majority of them, and leave 6 to 8 inches of leaves. So leaves is a natural material that falls on your property. You may have a lot of available leaves, or you may have minimum amount
They're
of leaves.
also good in the spring to mulch on your tomato plants, your containers,
Yeah.
anything you want, really.
We always try to save some extra and use for container gardening mulch. Now, they will dissipate. Again, they're going to break down, but that's the whole point. And as they break down, they add nutrients to the soil of that area, of that bed, of that container. So we look forward. We're disappointed each year as the fall comes because the growing season is over, but we're also excited because we get to use the leaves that fall as fertilizer, natural, organic, nature-made fertilizer for our garden beds. Coming up after the break, who do we got coming up on the program?
Amy Jeanroy, she's an author and a blogger. She's got some great information for us.
Right after this.
It's all about the soil at ManureTea.com. With their grass-fed, antibiotic, and growth hormone-free cattle and horses, owner Annie Haven puts the quality in her premium soil conditioner. 100% organic and natural, whether feeding your flowers or veggies, indoors or out, you can grow organically with confidence. To purchase authentic Haven brand manure tea, small orders or large, go to ManureTea.com. Always free shipping.
At dollarseed.com, all of our seeds are only $1 a pack. And we have online resources that teach you all about the rewarding hobby of growing your own plants, flowers, herbs, and vegetables. Imagine the joy you'll feel when your children actually help you harvest your first garden crop, or the pride of knowing you'll never need a florist again. Visit dollarseed.com and grow a little magic of your own for just $1. Dollarseed.com. What could be healthier?
Hello, this is Sean James Cameron from the Horticultural Channel based in London, England, giving you practical gardening advice for the amateur gardener. Check us out at thehortchannel.tv. But right now we're going to join Joey and Holly Baird on the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener Podcast.
Welcome back from the break. We want to encourage you to check out our sponsors. You can find them on our website at thewisconsinvegetablegardener.com under the podcast tab. Well, now it's time we're going to talk with our guest of the show. Her name is Amy Jeanroy, and she is a blogger. She's also an author, and she lives in Maine on a homestead with her husband and 5 children. And she's also a writer for About.com. And she talks about everything from food preservation to cooking and sustainable living. Welcome to the program, Amy.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, and you were a contributor and a writer for Fermenting for Dummies. Yes. And so one question that I know a lot of people don't necessarily think about, or if they do think about, they want to know when it comes to fermenting, what are some basic tools that they may need? They may think that they need, certain things, but maybe it's not as complicated as they think.
Right, and that's the great thing about fermenting. It's one of the actually reasons that I got involved with fermenting. We used to live on a mountain, and we were pretty isolated in Montana, and I was looking for ways to make our food a little bit different. If I was just eating out of our garden, the year was really long. So I had to come up with some cool ways to make stuff, and I had to use basic things. So to ferment, you can get really elaborate, as you mentioned, but basically you need glass containers, something to cover it to keep dust out. You need salt. Basically, sea salt is best. You need fresh foods. If you're going to be doing vegetables and fruits, fresh is best. And, time. And then depending on what you're fermenting, you use a starter for some things, and you would have to find, for instance, a kombucha starter or a kefir starter. But a lot of things you can lacto ferment, and that just requires a brine, so salt and water covering the vegetables. So it is really simple.
Great. And a lot of times I know, like, for me, I found my stuff online, the kombucha starter, but even if you know somebody who has it, you can always find it from them. But it's pretty accessible these days, and it's not too costly considering you just keep turning it over and over.
Right, and eventually you're going to be giving it away. Just realize that, because that's the nature of it.
So now that we're in the fall and we're heading to, we're getting into October. What are some things, we're kind of done getting the tomatoes out of our garden and the cucumbers and the peppers, but maybe we have some root vegetables like beets or carrots or turnips. Are those good to ferment?
Yes, they're wonderful to ferment. So you can keep getting things from your garden or your farmer's market and kind of experimenting with different flavors. Root vegetables are really fun. My kids especially like them because they keep their crunchiness. And kids, they love that texture thing. So if you have carrots, as you said, beets, turnips, and of course garlic and onion, combine those in any way that you want to, and that would be something that you would lacto ferment. So you would make a brine, and then you would pour it over the vegetables so they were submerged. One thing I do like to recommend is that you keep the pieces fairly the same size. You end up with a more consistent product. So, slice them all as close as you can. You don't have to be super exact, but don't have big pieces of beets and then thin pieces of carrots, for instance.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And now that I know when you're fermenting, a lot of times with the temperature, that makes a difference, how long it takes. Is that going to change now that we're getting to the cooler times of year?
Yeah, for most of us, it takes a little bit longer to ferment in the fall and winter, and I kind of like that. It feels like I have a little bit more control over my fermenting in the summer. It's so warm, and it almost feels like I have to check more often and kind of hurry up and store the stuff that's ready and get started with the next. It feels a little bit more rushed. But this time of year, I have a few extra days, and of course, you get used to the flavors that you like, and so you would judge by the flavor and how tart or how fermented, if you will, that it is, but don't always go by the same time frame as in the summer when it's really hot. So,
right, that's great to know. And you do a goat milk kefir, right?
I do, and I generally, during this time of year, I'm not doing as much because my goats are getting ready to kid, so they're drying up a little, and then I hold off milking them for a few weeks. And so I'm low on goat's milk kefir, and I just switch over and do a lot more kombucha, and I just change to things that are available. It's the same thing that applies in the summer. Seasonal is seasonal, and even in the winter things change. So, yep.
That's great. Now, one question, you had written this book, Fermenting for Dummies, and you're a pretty busy lady. You have 5 kids, you have that homestead, and you do some homeschooling. Where do you find time to, write your blog and write the book? How do you kind of fit that in?
Well, I fit it in here and there. You'll notice on my blog, for instance, during the summer, I'm scarce. I'm not often there because we're in the garden or we're out in the barn or, we're really active on the farm. And then during the winter, I really like to post a lot of recipes and a lot of ways that people can stretch their food bill and, including fermenting and canning and all of that. That's really when I have a lot more content. So as far as having time, I think I just do what I can, and then at the end of the day, I'm satisfied and start again the next day.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I completely understand that. And then, say somebody's new to fermentation, what is the best advice you can give them if they're just starting out?
If you're just starting out, please start small and simple. There's nothing wrong with starting out with a quart of kefir or a quart of kombucha. My recipe that I always use is 3 quarts, but that isn't all that much. I can fit it in 1-gallon jar, and it's easy to keep ahead of. I know that people get really excited when something works, and then the next thing you know, they've got 5 or 6 different jars of things going at the same time. And no matter how careful you are and how meticulous you are, things do go wrong. That's just the nature of learning, especially a skill like this. So if you start small and you kind of make sure you're really in control the whole time, then the whole process is just fabulous, and you don't end up wasting a lot of product or having a big mess or something, and then you just feel like you can't manage it. A lot of times problems, air quotes, that people say they have with fermenting all boils down to just taking on too much at once. So start small and really understand what you're doing and understand how the flavors develop and what your family likes.
I definitely understand that. I killed my kefir grain, my milk kefir grains, by just having too many projects and taking on too much. But
I still do that. I mean, I still do that. I'm guilty of it, but it's always nice when you know just something's ready, it's time to switch over to a new batch, and you drink or eat that whole batch, and then you're ready for the next one, and it's really nice to have that kind of control.
Definitely. So for people who aren't familiar with what maybe they don't realize that they've eaten fermented foods already, what are some common foods that are consumed that are fermented?
You know, I always get that question, and it's funny, but yogurt, actual good yogurt, is fermented. So you probably have been eating it your whole life and didn't even realize it. Sour cream, that's another one that's fermented. That's a common everyday food. Cheeses are fermented, even though they're the way we think of them, you don't think of it in the same way as you do a kombucha, which is pure liquid. But they're fermented. Good sausages, they're all fermented foods. I mean, there's a lot going on with healthy bacteria in food, and we never really put it in the fermentation department, but you've probably had many, many things right at the grocery store that have been fermented. Back in the olden days, they didn't have refrigeration, so they used a lot of different techniques that made their food viable. You know, it lasted all winter long, like pickles and meats and that kind of thing. So there's a lot out there. You could find a lot of foods that are fermented.
I definitely agree, especially, I know, like seeing kimchi and sauerkraut. People don't necessarily always, I think, realize that that's fermented, but it is a very common consumed item.
And sauerkraut is great to start with. If somebody wanted to get started, fermenting tomorrow, you know, all that is a head of cabbage and some salt in a glass container. It's super easy and really, really tasty.
Yes, definitely. I think, as you know, it's a little bit simpler than some other projects, and most people are familiar with it. Now, you do a decent amount of canning as well. If someone has a recipe that they want to can, say it's, you know, a recipe passed down from years after years, how do they determine if it's safe for canning, or is it something that maybe they should find a similar recipe for?
I always say I myself have my grandmother's recipes and my husband's grandmother and great-grandmother's recipes. I love that. I pull them out and I think about, what is this, you know, in modern day, what would we call this? And then, you know what I do? I go out and find the modern recipe for that item. So I do not trust fermented food recipes from 10, 20 years ago without looking at updated pressure recommendations and food prep recommendations. But there's going to be very, very little that you can't figure out the modern technique for. And I have heard people say, oh, my grandmother or whatever has done that forever and she never got sick. She got lucky. So the thing about fermenting and canning is that when it goes really well, canning specifically, when it goes really well, it's wonderful. When it goes poorly, you're extremely sick. So there's not an in-between. You don't just get an upset stomach with canning. Do you understand? It's either, yeah, you did great, or now you're in the hospital. So it's very important that we always look for the most modern recipes. And, oh, my goodness, there's so many now. You wouldn't have any trouble finding something modern that matches what your grandmother did.
Exactly. There's definitely a lot of up-to-date information out there. Well, thank you for coming on the program, Amy. To get in touch with you, to find more information about you, where can our listeners go?
Yeah, you can find me at thefarmingwife.com, and you can email me at amy@thefarmingwife.com. I love to talk about canning and fermenting and gardening and goats and anything to do with homesteading. So send me an email. I'd love to chat.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again.
Thank you so much.
A gardener knows that the key to a good plant is its roots. With poor roots, the end result is not good. Conventional pots and trays cause roots to wrap around and become root-bound. Then you try to unwrap the roots at the time of planting, hoping not to break them. But never again with the Root Maker, a non-chemical innovation that naturally air prunes roots to create more vigorous roots. Never a root-bound plant again. Whether trees, flowers, or edibles, home garden or commercial grower, more roots means healthier, more productive plants. To get your own, visit rootmaker.com.
It's Joey
and Holly Baird
of the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener Podcast, taking a moment to remind you that you can sign up for a weekly email so you don't miss anything that we do, our podcasts, our videos, our digital quarterly magazine. You won't miss anything by signing up.
Just go onto our website on the right-hand side. There's a big button for you to press. Just go ahead and sign up for our emails.
And you can also ask us questions. Underneath that big green button, there's a big red button. So sign up for our emails for free. No spam, and if you got a question, you can send us that as well. WisconsinVegetableGardener.com for the health-conscious organic gardener worldwide.
Hi, I'm Douglas E. Welch from A Gardener's Notebook at douglasewelch.com. Whether I'm out working in the garden or dreaming of gardening during the long, cold winter nights, I love to hear what's happening in the garden with Joey and Holly Baird on the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener Podcast.
Welcome back to the program. If you'd like to check out the sponsors you've just heard and our entire sponsor lineup, you can check them out at our website at the WisconsinVegetableGardener.com. You click on the podcast tab, and they're right there. They're also in the show notes below. Well, we've got 2 more topics to cover before we get out of here and wrap this show up for the year. We've got gardening in 2 minutes, and we're going to talk about what do you do when you have too many fruit on your property, too many apples, too many pears, and you just don't know what to do with it. But first, Gardening in 2 Minutes. Gardening in 2 Minutes is an audio program that Holly and I produce for a number of podcasts and a few radio shows on a weekly basis. If you would like Gardening in 2 Minutes on your particular program, you can contact us through the website. This Gardening in 2 Minutes is all about
frost protection.
And here is Gardening in 2 Minutes. This is Gardening in 2 Minutes. As fall approaches, that means the chance of frost is much higher. So what do you do when you have plants that are outdoors that you want to protect for at least a few more growing days before the frost kills them?
What you want to do, the biggest thing is if your plants are in the ground, you want to water them, make sure they're hydrated properly.
A hydrated plant is less likely or have a lower chance of being frost damaged or killed than a non-hydrated plant because the plant is as healthy as it possibly can be.
You also want to think about if you have containers, you can simply just pull them in a shed or a garage, put them in your back hallway. Even if you have to put them in your car, you can get them away from the frost.
And it also depends on the type of plant. Tomatoes can tolerate some levels of a frost without being covered compared to a watermelon or cantaloupe or pumpkin that can't handle any frost whatsoever. You can also cover these plants with a bed sheet but remove them at daybreak. You can also cover them with plastic, clear plastic, but any place where the foliage contacts the plastic, that foliage will die because of the contact with the environment. So these are just some of the ways that you can potentially prolong the life of your plants in your garden, even though we know at some point that they're going to die because of the cold weather.
If you are an early riser and you can't cover your plants, you can spray the frost off your plants right away in the morning to help prolong their life.
This may not save all of them, but it will greatly enhance the chances of survival rate. For more information on protecting your plants from frost, our weekly video productions, as well as our free downloadable digital quarterly magazines. You can find all that information at
thewisconsinvegetablegardener.com.
For the health-conscious organic gardener worldwide. For Gardening in 2 Minutes, I'm Joy Baird.
I'm Holly Baird.
So let's talk about, for our last topic, for our last show for this year. We'll come back next year with 18 shows. We'll start in February. We'll see you then. But first, let's talk about, it's the time to harvest fruit from your fruit trees. Now, some of us are not fortunate enough to have fruit trees on our property. We're talking apple trees, pear trees. So with us, for our we're going to talk about us because we know us. We don't know you, but we can offer you ideals on what you can do with abundance of fruit coming from the trees. We've got a pear tree on the property. Not sure how old it is. Been here as long as anybody can remember.
It's pretty old.
It's probably 30 feet high by 20 feet wide, you know, and it drops a lot. It's loaded with pears. It's a massive pear tree. We featured it in a couple of our videos. And for preference here, last year we brought in the house 295 pounds of pears. And I think we made some pear butter, and we've juiced the rest of them. Well, with there was more pears than 295 pounds. We figured there was probably at least 1,000 to 1,500 pounds of pears, just because we just took a little chunk of what the tree produced. And there's a number of things that you can do with apples or pears, and those are the two that we're going to focus on right now, because those are two we know best. You can juice them. Now, we have a commercial juicer where it juices and it throws the pulp one way and the juice the other. And then we allow the juice to settle, and then we siphon it off to get pure pear juice, so we don't have no pulp in the juice. Now, if you don't have a juicer, is there a way that you can juice apples or pears if you don't have a cider press or a commercial juicer like we do?
I guess what you could do, realistically, I mean, it's going to take a little bit more work, but you could take a blender or a food processor, put the pears or apples in there, process them up, then squeeze the juice out of that pulp with like a cheesecloth.
Yeah, a little more process of it.
Yeah.
So that's one way to do it. I personally would invest the $80 or $100.
Especially if you have one of these trees, or if you have access to a lot of this fruit, it's worth it. And then if you, like, for example, we bought some pineapples over the winter. We juiced them, and that was really nice having that fresh pineapple juice. So it's not just like something you might use once a year. You'd use it more. Right,
and we allow that juice to settle, as I spoke about, and then you have this very, I don't know what color would you call that? Amber color pear juice that is just as pure as can be. We don't add no sugar. We add nothing. We simply put it in jars, water bath it, and it's good to go. Now, there are a number of other things that one can do with abundance of apples and pears, and we'll just go over a couple of them. We obviously can make pie filling with apples or pears, and now that takes an additional substance that you have to buy online.
It's called Clear Gel, and Clear Gel makes that pie filling. It makes it so it has that.
It's not a bad chemical.
No. It's natural. It has that pie filling consistency with like the kind of syrupy, goopy goodness. And it's only found online. You want to buy the cooked type, not the instant. So the cooked type, and lots of places you can find it. You can just do a search for it, and you'll find it. And you want to use that, and make sure you buy. If you're going to do a lot of pie filling, you want to make sure you know how much you're getting, so that you don't have too little. And you have enough. And then so you can make pie filling. You can make jam, pear sauce, applesauce, pear butter. We had a lot of success making pear butter in the slow cooker, because that way it can cook down, but you don't have to be constantly...
It's not burning.
It's not burning, yeah. Stuff sometimes when you have to cook it on the stove for a long time, you have to stir it and watch it. In the slow cooker, it's nice and slow.
Right.
But if you do it in the slow cooker, you want to make sure that you vent the lid, like you put some wooden spoons or offset the lid, so that otherwise it's going to just keep... When it cooks down, you want the moisture to evaporate. If you don't vent the lid, that moisture won't evaporate.
Right, and then you're not accomplishing anything when doing that. Now, there's other things that one can do with and then we cover this in an article in our 2014 Fall Digital Magazine, 11 Delicious Ideals for Apples and Pears, and we'll provide that link in the show notes for you. But what other things can one do? You can freeze this, can you not?
Yeah, you can freeze them. Then you could also, we made basically apple cider vinegar, but with the pears.
Right. Pear scraps.
With the pear scraps.
We
made pear scrap vinegar.
Right.
Yeah. And that was good because, we use, it's kind of similar to like Bragg's apple cider vinegar, and this is stuff that we made ourselves. So that's a good idea with the scraps. And that's pretty simple to do. What else? There's different desserts you can make with it. That was kind of fun. So yeah, there's a lot of different options. Another thing you can do is you can dehydrate your pears, and that makes a nice snack. Or if you want to, after you dehydrate them, grind them up, and then that makes pear tea, which is...
Explain that, yeah. Explain this homemade pear tea.
So basically, pear tea is just the dehydrated pears, and then you can mix other things with it. You could add it to, say you have some black tea and you want to make black pear tea, you just add it to your black tea. Or say you have like a rooibos, you can add the pear to it, and it just enhances the flavor. Or you can just heat up some water and have some hot.
No, we're not
tea.
now pouring the grinded pear in there. We're putting it into a coffee filter.
Yeah, or the tea thing.
Well, right. You kind of made it describe that you're just pouring that grounded pear.
No.
Okay,
you want to use like a tea ball or whatever you got, a tea strainer thing, if you're going to do that. But yeah.
And you could do this for probably apples as well.
Yeah.
And we'll put the link for the 11 delicious ideals in the show notes from our digital magazine. But let's talk about chutney.
So chutney is kind of like a salsa-ish. I know most people think salsa, they think tomatoes. You're not adding tomatoes. It's like it's just kind of like a little something, like a relish,
right,
a fruit relish, and it's really good. We made a pear, cranberry, or cherry or something chutney, and it's really good on like ham or pork because it mixes well with the saltiness, the sweetness, and tastes pretty good. So you could do that as well.
And you can find a lot of these canning ideals on our YouTube channel, which can be found through our website. And then you go down through the YouTube channel and you'll find Canning What You Grow, and there's a lot of good canning recipes, and we'll show you step by step. Holly takes us in the kitchen and she shows us how to go about canning some of these delicious items. Well, that will pretty much wrap it up for this show. Ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for being supportive of us and our sponsors and joining us each episode here this year in 2015. We hope you truly enjoyed it and that we were able to offer you information and content and bring you guests that you otherwise would not have heard of or heard about, and you were able to utilize some of the information that they were able to offer us and have another network connection and learn from them, from their websites and their videos and their podcasts. The audio that you've heard is courtesy of sfx.co.uk and audioneutronics.com, two royalty-free and copyright-free websites that we use to help liven up the podcast.
And also dollarseed.com and Nasa Ala Kombucha provided their own audio.
Until 2016, when we will get at this again, fresh and new, I'm Joy Baird.
I'm Holly Baird.
And we will see you in the garden. The Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener Podcast is a production of the WisconsinVegetableGardener.com for the health-conscious organic gardener worldwide, and distributed in association with WI Garden Media.